Hi everyone, it's user Toothless, and I'm back for the second part of my How to Train Your Dragon analysis on the Alpha system. If you'd like to see the groundwork for this video, please go check out the first part. Right now, what I'd like to do is to give some specific examples to bolster my argument that the Alpha system is not based off of some kind of mind control ability unique to the Bewilderbeasts, but is actually based on dragon instincts to obey whichever dragon becomes the alpha. So for the first part of my argument, I'd like to hit on the Scuttleclaw babies. If you remember, these tiny dragons can be found in the alpha's nest made of ice, and they fly around and jump on the large, kind Bewilderbeast and bite on him, acting spastic. They're called babies, and Valka notes that they don't listen to anyone. So, at the end of the film, Hiccup is able to use these tiny dragons to actually fly back to Berk, and he can approach the evil Bewilderbeast, Drago's Bewilderbeast, with these tiny dragons, and they are not put under the control of the Alpha. So, the question I have for this is, if it was some kind of unique dragon ability that a Bewilderbeast has to mind control other dragons, why would it not work on infants? Why would a baby dragon's mind be more difficult to control? However, if we consider the fact that the Alpha system is based in instincts that are inside each dragon, perhaps those instincts don't mature until later on. This would make sense considering that the Alpha system is primarily, in my view, a defensive mechanism, and if you're designing a mechanism to protect the species, you don't really want one that could send infant dragons into war. Those need to be protected. However, once they're combat ready, their instincts develop and they're able to be controlled by the Alpha in a dragon army. So what this would imply is that the Alpha system isn't limited per se to the Bewilderbeasts, and this is one of the primary parts of my argument. It should also be noted that the Scuttleclaws aren't just a special type of species that won't obey any dragon. In the Serpent's Heir, we actually see them obeying an older dragon. I believe it's called a Thunderclaw, and it roars at them and they all get into line. So clearly they're able to obey commands. It's just they don't have an instinct developed to obey the commands of the Alpha, to go into the Red Rage. Now, the instinct is not species restricted. We see every kind of dragon so far in the How to Train Your Dragon series has reacted to the Alpha system. They are able to go under its control, whether it's Cloud Jumper or Stormfly. It can be Toothless or Meatlug. We see even Little Terrible Terrors. All these different species have to obey the Alpha. So if it's a unifying instinct between all different dragon species, it would make sense for all the different species to actually be able to compete for this position. So we know Toothless challenges the Alpha, and when in combat, the other dragons are released from the Bewilderbeast's command. So when Toothless is fighting the Bewilderbeast, at first he has a swarm of dragons behind him, enslaved and under his command. But as soon as Toothless challenges him and the battle begins to become heated, his command is lost. And I believe this is because the Alpha position is in limbo at this point. Toothless could become the Alpha, or the evil Bewilderbeast could stay the Alpha. And as soon as that position is compromised, the Alpha is not allowed to bring in other dragons to help him win. He has to fight the challenge on his own. So Toothless doesn't command the other dragons to follow him. They don't necessarily see him as Alpha yet, but they do see him as a potential candidate. And that's why they all rush to his side to help him, because I suppose they see Toothless as a more suitable Alpha, and an Alpha that won't lead them into a bloody and unnecessary war that could get hundreds of them killed. So they want an alpha that will protect him. And because of that, they side with Toothless, not because he has authority over them yet, but because they want to basically elect an alpha who will do the job right. So once Toothless does become the alpha, we do see him force other dragons to submit to him. Now, initially he doesn't do this. Initially they bow to him and he's almost shocked. But in the Serpent's Heir, we see him pacify other dragons. Some of these dragons are dragons that Toothless hasn't even met yet. So, spoiler alert, near the end of the comic, Toothless is able to pacify tremendous Titan-class dragons called Forever Wings. And doing this is really quite impressive because he's such a small dragon and yet they recognize him as the alpha. But how do they do this? These Forever Wings surely have not seen Toothless fight the other alpha and become the leader. So I'm assuming that when a dragon becomes alpha, they subtly start to behave as the alpha. Now, whether the dragon notices this or not, I don't know. I would almost think that they don't because at first Toothless is confused at what's happening. But something deep inside them, an instinct that's just as ingrained as the red rage, causes them to start acting like what they are. So their behavior tells all the dragons that meet them, oh, this is the alpha. Now this leads to the question, could a dragon fake being the alpha? And I suppose something could go wrong or the dragon could figure it out, and they could, but I imagine it's just as unlikely for a dragon to fake being the alpha as it is for one to break out of the red rage and disobey the alpha. Speaking of the red rage, we do see a lot of evidence to support the audio and visual cues that would command the dragons and cause an instinct inside of them to well up and take control. So recall that Toothless seemed to hear something, maybe the Red Death, in the first film, right after the romantic flight scene, and he's drawn to the nest after hearing that sound. This is a queen doing it, not the alpha, but perhaps it's the same basic principle. If you recall, Valka is also able to stun Toothless by just a gesture. So the dragons are obviously very vulnerable or volatile to audio and visual cues. And this would all be because of the alpha system. Now, to prevent Toothless from going back under the alpha's control, Hiccup places a cloth over his eyes and holds down his ears. This works, and Toothless is able to attack the alpha dragon directly without being controlled by it. If you remember, this happens near the climax of the second film. So, why would this work? If it's mind control, why would covering Toothless's eyes and covering his ears be effective at keeping him from going back under the alpha's command? If you remember, Toothless shakes his head around angrily right before that happens, and Hiccup tells him that we need to keep blocking him out. We need to keep the alpha out so that Toothless won't succumb to his instincts yet again. Now, if the alpha could simply enter the mind of dragons and take acts on their behalf, why is Toothless so slow to act when in the red rage? He takes a long time to shoot at Hiccup. If you remember when it first happens, he paces forward very slowly, and it's very intimidating, and it's a horrifying scene. But perhaps the slowness and effort shown on Toothless's part is him actually resisting the instinct. After he shoots Stoic, if you recall, he stands there panting, and maybe this weariness, this exhaustion, is the result of him fighting against that instinct. Unsuccessfully, but he is. So, if the alpha doesn't mind control the dragons, why did Toothless lose his memory of killing Stoic? This is an interesting point, because if someone else has entered your mind and taken control of your body, you could understand not remembering it. You weren't the one doing that thinking, you weren't the one taking those actions, so you wouldn't remember doing it. That lends support to the argument that I don't believe, and that is that the wildebeest has some form of actual mind control. But I believe that the instinct to follow the alpha intentionally removes individuality. This includes any kind of overt emotion, as well as attachment. It is obvious that Toothless is hardly able to recognize the people around him while under the command of the alpha. It may be that the instinct is even able to shut off memories. It cuts off the dragon's connection with his past. If the instinct is shutting out memories, it may very well be able to suppress them as well. So that's my explanation on why Toothless is confused and doesn't remember exactly what he's done. If all of this is true, what happened in the Toothless found scene? When Hiccup and Toothless are reunited and Hiccup breaks Toothless out of the Red Rage for the first time, up in the air when Drago's riding him. I think this scene, first off, is just fantastic. I love it, and it might be my favorite scene in the whole movie, but I'm not sure. Throughout How to Train Your Dragon 2, we see so many different ways in which humans and dragons interact. Valka basically became a dragon, while Drago forces the dragons to be empty shells of what they once were. But, just fantastically, Hiccup and Toothless both take a step in each other's direction. Hiccup becomes more dragonish, he gets wings, and quote-unquote breathes fire with that sword, while Toothless learns what it's like to be part of a family. And as a side note, Toothless even mimics speech when Hiccup calls him a big baby boo. So Hiccup reaches to that part of Toothless that has moved beyond being a simple dragon. Toothless has become more than that. Hiccup offers him forgiveness, something that we rarely ever see in wild dragons. Hiccup reminds Toothless that he is his best friend, something that is mind-blowing if you stop to think about it. The sheer emotional power of what Hiccup is doing, along with him being close enough for Toothless to see and hear him clearly, overwhelms the instincts raging inside of Toothless. It is as if the humanish part of his soul reached out of the sea of primal instincts and broke the chains. If you aren't just a dragon, you don't have to obey the alpha. After that point, Toothless is finally angered enough to challenge the alpha himself. At this stage, he is a challenger, so his instincts don't require him to obey. I think it's pretty cool that Toothless initiates this battle all on his own, not with Hiccup riding him. He chooses to risk everything to become the alpha, so that he can never be forced to harm Hiccup again. So there are my arguments and analysis. These are all that I can think of off the top of my head. There may be more that I've forgotten, but what do you guys think? If you have anything you still want me to address, please feel free to let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and bye.